Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are the Urban Teacher Collective. My name is Christian Miskell, and to my right, or maybe to your left in the video, is Alexis Rylander-Bennett, Satoia Wright, and Cassandra Ogbevire. We decided to come together and just kind of share with you guys what the Urban Teacher Collective is, and really talk about our pedagogies and how we came to be a team. Did anybody want to kind of go in first and kind of talk about who they are and why we came to be the Urban Teacher Collective?
Sure. So I'll start. My name is Cassandra Ogbevire. I am a native of Chicago, Illinois. And the reason why I came into education was because I was really interested in learning how education can be used as a tool to help students with their identity development as well as social upward mobility. So that is one of the reasons, the primary reason why I came into education and why I am very passionate about this work.
Hey everybody, my name is Alexis Rylander-Bennett. I'm currently an instructional coach, but traditionally I've taught science in the city of Philadelphia. I'm also a native of Philadelphia, so shout out to the big 215. I got into education untraditionally, just like a lot of people, and I noticed how difficult it was for myself to go through a science program. And I did not want other students in Philadelphia to have that experience due to lack of preparation and proper exposure. So that's how I got into education, and I've never left, and I plan on staying for a lifetime. So.
Hello, everyone. My name is Satoia Wright. I am a middle school and secondary mathematics instructor. I took an alternative route to education as well. I actually major in Spanish language, literature and culture and psychology, but after participating in a couple nonprofit organizations, I was in the classroom and was able to see the inequities that students were presented with the classroom and presented with in the classroom, and seeing individuals who had all the certifications but kind of lacked the skills and the passion to really give students what they deserve. Quite honestly, I sat back and I was like, I think I can do this, and I think I can do a better job, and I'm committed to doing a better job. So that's how I got into the field of education.
Yeah, and again, as before, my name is Christian Miskell, and I've kind of always really wanted to be an educator. I have always been interested in teaching, mentoring, working with youth. For me, school was structure for me. School was an escape. For some of my home life experiences, I just found that being in a school where people actually had expectations for me, like we're actually asking where I was, what I was up to, and kind of encouraging and supporting my beliefs and my goals. And I wanted to be able to be an educator and give that back, of pushing people to kind of find within themselves the strength to be the best people that they can be. So for me, teaching has always been at the heart and center of my identity. Yeah, so I guess the next thing I was really interested in is, like, how do we get to know each other? Like, how do we meet? Like, we've all been kind of, doing our different stuff. Like, we, as some viewers might come to know, or people that know us that are watching, we've been in the Philadelphia area for a while. Rylander's from here, and I guess I'll start off. Me and Cass's journey began at UPenn, where we both took our master's degrees and the reading, writing, and literacy program, and we took a couple classes together. And I remember the first class where I met Cass, we were in this like dialogic teaching class, like a reading class, and I walked in and
Shout out to Dr. Thomas.
Dr. Ebony Elizabeth Thomas, and she was my advisor. And I think I took like 4 or 5 classes with her, but that's a whole other episode about her work and her laziness. But I remember me and Cass took the class together. I walked in, Cass is wearing this yellow like top, like shining and glowing, and she's ready to go. And we just sat next to each other and we just vibed like right off the bat. It was one of those things that we got into conversations, and we just talked about our interest in teaching. And then I think from there we exchanged numbers, and we basically just became doc partners for the past 4 years now. So it's just been an excellent journey, and working and learning with Cass. And then I had to.
Can I interject real quick?
Go ahead.
So Chris and I, we knew each other, and I got a job at Boys Latin. And this was at the time when Chris was looking for a job, and I got the job. And someone was like, "Do you know a great composition teacher?" And I was like, I know someone, Miskell. So I hit up Miskell. Of course, he got it. Fast forward, we have BL, the orientation, and we meet Miss Satoia Wright, who just played no games. And at that orientation, a lot of us, you know how it is when you're at orientation, you kind of scope in the room, trying to figure out, what everyone's about. And like Satoia, she was just so serious. And I don't even know how we started talking. And I think there was one day when Alexis, she came, she did a talk about being a first year teacher at Boys Latin. And then, I don't know, Alexis, you want to take over? I don't even remember. And then
I remember.
She's like talking to you, Rye, about something about you saying.
Yeah, I remember I was coming in to talk about how Boys Latin was as far as support in the classroom, and I'm scanning the room to see who my allies are, like who are y'all, whatever. And I remember Satoia telling me, like, she gave me like a nice 3 days. When you say that she's serious, she gave me like a nice 3-day scan to make sure that I was with it, like if I was really down or not. So
Yes, I remember that day as well. And sometimes, institutions, put together panels and people come and present. And sometimes 1+1 doesn't equal 2. So yeah, I was in constant thought. I am a serious person, but I was really trying to piece everything together and see that if what these individuals were saying, if their practices aligned with what they espouse. So I was in deep thought for 3 days straight. And then I was like, oh, okay. And then once I found that people had the same questions that I had, not necessarily the same thought process or agreed on the same thing, but I'm like, they're asking the same questions that I'm asking, then I think that this is a good collective group and people to just align myself with. So
Yeah, and just to add a little on, not to give you all our whole friendship story, but Satoia, myself, and Chris actually taught 9th grade. And as a result of that, there were a lot of things that we saw that we were really concerned about. And Rylander at the time was teaching 10th grade. So she already knew like what the 9th grade lacked. So it just became, after school, we would all come together and just talk. And as we were talking, we just realized that, these are some thorough educators. These are educators that really care about the well-being of our students and want to ensure, because our school is predominantly Black, like really the essence of Black excellence. And as a result of that, we just became really close.
mm-hmm.
And we did a lot of stuff together. Do you want to talk about Warhead, Satoia?
Yeah. I think the students brought us together as well. And it's very nice to have solidarity in the school and the teachers out there. What we're talking about, to be teaching or saying things and hold an expectation. The students like, well, you sound like Miss Rylander. You sound like Miss Miskell. You sound like a you're like, wait a minute. They're on the same type time I am. We can really leverage that solidarity to push these students where they need to be. And so, Cass, you talked about earlier about identifying a need and a need that I think we all identified early on is that, oftentimes students, especially Black students, Black boys, are talked about through a deficit lens. And then we started to notice, hey, we're not putting enough highlight on the gentlemen, the Black kings in the room that's doing what they're supposed to be doing, that are excelling. And they need so much attention was given to the small population of students who were struggling and trying to, figure things out. But there was our middle students who people kind of didn't mention at all, forgot about. Then our high performing students. So we really wanted to put a spotlight on them, and we just came together and organized and developed a program called Warhood, in which we wanted to celebrate not only academic success, but more importantly, the identity of Black boys, which we know is not monolithic. It's very multifaceted. And we just wanted to affirm whatever their journey is and how they perceive Blackness, and just lift that up and elevate it to for the whole school to see.
And in addition to what Satoia is saying, we've presented at a number of conferences together, and we've kind of just been stuck at the hip ever since. We've taught together, even if when we branched out to different learning institutions, we still stay connected, because this unit has empowered us so much in our practice and allowed us to still be critical of the things that we do in the classroom, which was one of the reasons why we started this podcast as well.
And one thing I want to say to all the viewers out there is that on your team, you want people like you say, Rai, is that's down for the cause and the count. And everyone you see here, and even a couple of people that are not on the podcast today, when we created Warhood, when we organized together, that was 100% out of our own pockets, out of our own time and passion for the students. So on this podcast, I'm just so thankful to you guys. I've said it before and I want to say it now in front of everyone. Thank you for being down for the cause and the count, and put your money where your mouth is. Literally. Literally.
Honestly, what it is, you really have to take a step back and make sacrifices as an individual to do what's best for us, like for a group collectively. And when I was thinking about our time, I mean, since we did branch out to our individual institutions since then, but programming like Warhood remains. It's one of those things that, with like over time, we were able to get board of trustees support and get financial support, and then be able to get more people that wanted to jump on board. And something Satoia like constantly references, like people will sometimes asking why, and then once you start doing things, they're asking how, and they start coming to the table and listening. So we did whatever we could to do by example, by action, and then like even though we're no longer at BL, a lot of the programming and things that we put into place in terms of curriculum and hopefully changing the narrative around what it means to be a young Black student, a young Black male, has shifted. So, I'm hopeful that that seed that we planted will turn into a beautiful tree. So,
Nice.
Yeah. But look where we are now, Urban Teacher Collective, and I think that's one of those things that you know, as a group, like we continue to stay connected, and I think that's so important, especially as us being quarantined, is staying connected and knowing that even though teachers, we can't do our after school sessions. Like when we all first started getting together, like Cass was referencing, like after school or in between our planning sessions, even during lunchtime, we would get together and be like, huh, let me tell you about this lesson. Like I tried it. I was up all night. I was planning it, and I had everything ready, the do now, the activity, everything. I had the essential question. I had everything set. And then, and as we know, as, experienced educators, that not everything will ever go to plan. And I think that's something that here we are now quarantined and things aren't really going to plan. I would love for us to have all been in the same room, vibing off each other doing this, but we adjust and we adapt. And I think that's so important that for those of you listening at home to kind of see that you need to be able to adapt, you need to adjust.
So I think that would be a great segue, as a result of this pandemic, as a result of what's been going on in our country, with the killing of George Floyd and so many other Black and brown individuals, is really, we've come to a place in education where a lot of people are starting to ask the question, what can we do to ensure that our students are educated? And even where, I don't know, you all have been hearing a lot of things about anti-racist education. And I think Satoia, myself, Ryan, and Chris have been doing this work before it became popular. And I'm just curious, because a lot of us have been talking about this offline. Like, what are factors you all think have contributed to this, quote unquote, the awakening in terms of people now paying attention? I don't know about you all. Every year we always read books to kind of keep ourselves sharp. And I remember, shortly after the death of George Floyd and hearing like on social media, anti-racist education, like I went on to Amazon, Dr. Love's book was sold out, Dr. Code and Muhammad's book was sold out. And I was like, what is going on? And that made me think, okay, people are starting to educate themselves. So my question to you all is a twofold question. One, what has contributed to this mass awakening, this awakening where people are like, yes, anti-racist education needs to be taught? And then the second question is a more personal level, like, what does this awakening mean to you as an educator, right? So like as an educator in this space where you've been doing this work, what does this mass awakening, specifically the public, like paying attention, what does that mean to you all? So I don't know if people have thoughts on that.
I got a lot of thoughts. I'll jump in with just one quick thought. I'll talk about some of the things that have contributed to this through the lens as a white male. seeing these things, I mean, it's nothing new to me from, from the neighborhoods I grew up with. I've lost close friends to gun violence. I've had family members incarcerated, and I've seen the system lock down on individuals. But what I always experienced through my whiteness was how a community can be taken advantage of to uphold me and the group that I was a part of. And I think one of these things that we're seeing here is, what to Cass's point about people just constantly wanting to buy books and to be kind of awakened to this moment. It's one of those things that these kind of events have been happening forever. And I remember Will Smith talked about, like, nothing is different. It's just being recorded, right? It's just being shown. And I think it's been shown at such a level that, and especially with social media, that we're starting to see buying these books or taking this kind of action or using this kind of terminology as kind of trending, as like a trend. And I think it's so important that us as educators, that we can't just slap anti-racist onto a curriculum and call it anti-racist. What is the platforms, the foundations, and who are the people that we're looking to that will give us that pedagogy, or will give us that criticality, and what kind of lens are we using to teach this curriculum? Because if I say something's anti-racist, but I'm not even considering Freire, I'm not even considering Hooks, I'm not even considering, George Lipschitz, or any of these other critical foundational people that talk about race as place, or talk about, oppression and power, then is my curriculum actually anti-racist? And I think that's something that teachers should be considering. You can't just use the words if the words don't actually mean anything in action.
Cass, to answer your first question, as to why people are having this awakening, I think my honest answer is I don't know. Because like you mentioned earlier, this has been going on for centuries. And when I think back, my grandmother is from Duck Hill, Mississippi, and she used to tell us and show us newspapers where they would say a man was lynched today. And she would tell us and recount all these stories. And I think back to Emmett Till and how his mother made sure to have an open casket burial and funeral, in her words, so the world can see. And so I was watching something on Amanda Seales stories, and it's like, people are having these awakenings, like Black people just came out, you know what I mean? Like, we're just now starting to have these injustices and oppression and marginalization. So my honest answer is I don't know. And I think to go off what Chris said, is because it's trending and it looks bad not to be aware. It looks bad not to know. It looks bad not to be able to turn to your bookshelf and say, look at all this great literature I have here. It looks bad to not be able to use those buzzwords like anti-racist pedagogy, culturally relevant, pedagogy, like so many things that have been co-opted and people monetize, but they're not doing the work. And so to answer that question is, I don't know, but I think it's because it's trending and it looks bad to not know. It looks bad not to post that Black square. It just looks bad, and people don't want to look bad, and they want to appear as if they're on the right side of history. So I think that's one reason. I'm not saying because I think there's so many reasons for different people, but I do think that's one reason. But for me, personally, as an educator, there's just two things that come to mind when I think about what does this mean for me as a math teacher, especially in my classroom. And one thing, I think the first thing I really had to do is do like a self-analysis of how white supremacy has impacted my educational journey in schools. Like, what have I subconsciously internalized, and reflect back, which is very hard for me, like very hard to think back on the ways that I have perpetuated hegemony and white supremacist ideologies, because it's insidious. You can't see, and so that's the first thing. And as a math educator, and I don't know if you guys hear this a lot, but every single year, why am I learning this? What is the point? And I think that math has been socialized in a way as some esoteric topic that only a few are privy to understanding, and that only a few people should have access to great math instruction, therefore shutting out poor people, Black kids, brown kids from access to just greater possibilities, greater opportunities in high schools, in middle schools, and high schools and colleges. And so for me, I'm now, because I've been awoke with what's going on, but as a math educator, it's about reflecting and making delivering the content in a way that, hey, math, no matter how crazy it gets, it's just four basic operations. You added, subtracted, multiplied, or dividing, and then we're going to continue to look at it from multiple lens of perspectives in a way that not only invites but encourages the students' lived experiences, their perspectives, even if it's different than mine, and so that they can see that, first of all, knowing how to do math is in our DNA. It's not new to us. You know what I mean? And that they can find success in it. So I'm now being more critical on the way I teach the subject, and in a way that is not how I was taught from just a McGraw-Hill textbook and stuff like that. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's what came to my mind.
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to address a couple of things that Satoya said, and also other things that were said. One thing I want to say about your first question is to why people are more so aware. I think that the media has a lot to do with that, but I also think that um, the the loudness of the people, like not taking things and just kind of being silenced about those things, going out to the streets and making it known and making it public. And these things are a part of the reason why so much awareness is being brought. So when people are using the term riot, even though I don't agree with that, the riots, as they say, did bring a point of recognition to the issue that was already known, but also gave it more emphasis that people said, okay, we're tired and we want people to understand what level of frustration we are at. And so I think that that is a part of it. I also think that it has a lot to do with being, I agree with Satoya in the way that you have to self assess yourself. Because Black people are not exempt to upholding white supremacist ideals. And I think a lot of times we get into this notion of as long as we have Black representation or if we have Latinx representation, then we're good and we have that perspective. And that might not necessarily be true. There are people within that race or those races that encourage racist ideologies in themselves. So those are just a couple of comments, but definitely the media definitely brings attention. The activity definitely brings some attention. And I definitely agree with what you're saying because I was looking on Amazon and all the books were sold out. And I think that now is kind of pushing people in a direction to educate themselves. But my question is, where does it go from here? Is it just you read the book, you inhale the text, and kind of after that you're like, okay, I know about it. I can understand systematic racism. I feel sorry for those people and move on, because the real work comes in at actually applying it as a practitioner, and it especially takes in a major responsibility for us as practitioners and how we go about that work moving forward.
And if I could just clarify something I said earlier, now I was reflecting on like what does that look like for a math teacher? Traditionally, in my early years, I taught math in a very a rote way, and as Carter G. Woodson said, merely imparting information is not educating. It's not enough. So I think a big part is that it's developing like inquiry, exploring, criticalness, and my mathematical pedagogy also is how I'm, you see what I'm saying, how I'm trying to transform my instruction.
Yeah, and if I could add on to that, because I think everyone has made really valid points. I think for me personally, thinking about this mass awakening, I really feel as though we're in a pandemic. We're like experiencing a pandemic in a pandemic. That's what my pastor said. So as a result of this global pandemic, I think it like people were forced home. A lot of people, if we could totally be transparent, and I may not be sounding right or whatever when I say this, I think some people realized they were kind of untouchable, right? And when I say untouchable, meaning I have a good job, I have X, Y, and Z, I'm good, right? And as a result of this pandemic, we noticed that a lot of people who may have had been gainfully employed, they lost their jobs. A lot of people, there was just a lot going on, if that makes sense. And then on top of that, we have the continual killings of Black and brown and trans people. And something that I always wondered in my head was like, even in a pandemic, racism is still pervasive. And I think as a result of that, as you all mentioned, people woke up, but people were like, this is crazy, y'all. Like, even when it came to the way people, specifically, Black and brown people were contracting, the virus, as a result of that. So people are just like, okay, y'all, we're in a pandemic. there's still this police brutality that is not stopping in a pandemic. Then we have people who are fighting for us, fighting for our rights, going to the streets. A lot of them are contracting the virus. A lot of them don't have health care. And I think it comes to the point where people are like, of course, sick and tired of being sick and tired. But I just feel as though like those things made people realize, yo, this is really sick. Like this is really pervasive. And as a result of that, there is no way. I mean, at this point, and I could be wrong for saying this, for you to say that racism is not prevalent in 2020 after what is going on politically, socially, there is no way. And I think as a result of that, people are being forced in a pandemic. People are getting killed. People are being forced now to see, okay, y'all, we really have this issue, right? You know, even when people have the conversation about, you know, we're in the post-civil rights era, right? You know what I mean? Like Civil Rights Act era, like everything should be good. But like, I think this pandemic, within the pandemic, is really forcing people to really reflect and like, yeah, this can't happen. And then I think they're taking advantage of, okay, people are paying attention. Let's tear down these whole systems, right? While we're at it, like education is trash. Let's be honest, you know, when it comes to, you know, quality of education, access for all, which we found out during the pandemic, where people, specifically kids that we taught in inner city schools, didn't have access to kids in private schools. People were like, what? But we've been saying this, right? And I think it took the pandemic on top of what's going on politically for people to be like, nah. And then on top of that, it's an election year. People are like, oh, heck nah, like this, we got to do something different. So I think it's kind of like I don't want to say it's necessarily like a perfect storm, but I think all of these ingredients that you all have mentioned have led to this moment where people are like, you know what, this is our time. We're going to seize this opportunity to ensure that we can really ensure that our children, and then people really, our children get what they need, and then people have access to like things to thrive. People are tired of surviving. People want to thrive. And I think as a result of what is occurring now that we're seeing, I think people are just like, you know what, it's time to get mine. So I think that, yeah, that's what I think. No, that was a tangent, but that's something I've been thinking a lot about.
No, and I mean, and what you said makes perfect sense. I mean, you would think like a lot of people are under that impression that because we're locked down and not sharing physical spaces, that racism is just going to cease to exist. But we know even in the digital realm, the white supremacist tactics are perpetuated in the way we teach students over a digital medium. I mean, we have young Black women being arrested for not doing their homework. You know, so these actions are still pervasive regardless of where we are physically, because it's beyond the physical realm. It's in the mental, it's in the spatial, it's in the imagination. And I think it's one of those things that we as teachers, I mean, we know it's really important for me, because I just know as teachers, we know that ever since Brown v. Board, and we know that since the Civil Rights Act, we have fewer and fewer Black teachers teaching Black children. I mean, the fact that I am the only white person on this screen right now is not even representative of what the actual urban education space looks like, right? So that's something too that I think us as a collective can start thinking about and coming together too, is how do we get it to look more representative of the students that we teach?
In addition, if I can add to what you're saying, Chris, in addition to being intentional about recruitment and retaining of Black talent within the teaching force, we additionally have to do a better job at our white educators. If those are the people that's going to be in front of Black and brown children or low income children or children who struggle with language barriers and everything, then we have to do a better job at training those individuals before they come in contact with our young people, because it's been serving some, and don't get me wrong, this is not all white educators. Chris is one of my favorite educators, period. Like nobody is over him, you know what I mean? But a lot of times the people who are in front of our kids are culturally disconnected, and they think that the way to contact and be relevant with the kids, and that's why I hate like culturally relevant pedagogy now. No offense to Ladson Billings and her work, because her work is phenomenal and is based in all credibility goes to her. But what has transpired to in practice has just been a buzzword or a term that's used to see, okay, this lyric of a music video, you know, aligns with student experience, and so therefore it's very surface level on that end. So we have to do a better job too on both ends, both with teachers of color and recruitment and retirement, but also with white educators that are in front of our kids.
I have a question for you guys. So if we were to tell our viewers at home why we are this collective, like what is our overall goal? What can people expect to receive from being a part of this collective and joining us on this journey? What are some things that you are hopeful that people will see that we can offer?
There's a lot.
A lot, right?
One thing I was going to say is I listen to Amanda Seals as one of my favorite podcasts. She's one of my favorite people. And one thing that I just get from her is confirmation and affirmation. And one thing that what I really want this podcast is to gear towards people who are actually doing the work in education. And when we say do the work, that's also become like a little phrase that people like to use, like do the work. But we're talking about people who are really actually making curriculum that is relevant, constantly critical of their practice, always being reflective, always thinking about what it looks like 21st century skills and how to prepare students for the next level and for citizenship in our country. And so for those people, this is the podcast for you, because this is going to talk about a lot of the issues that we run up against, but also to some solutions and helpful resources for you as well to overcome those barriers. Because everybody on this call has been up against the system in education. We know how difficult it can be and how many barriers you run up against. But this podcast is going to be for you because you're not alone in the fight, and you'll have 4 familiar faces that you can lean on for educational resources, as well as just somebody to affirm your experiences with.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with what Rye said about that affirmation piece. But in addition to everything she said, but also I think something that's not spoken about is that I think I know I came into this work very naive, like I'm going to present this great pedagogy and lessons in front of my fellow students, and they're going to welcome me with open arms, and they're really going to want to just be on the same page that I am. And rarely has that been the case for me. And it's not that the desire wasn't there. It's just that when you're educated in a system for so long that doesn't affirm who you are, does not welcome your experiences, does not challenge you in a way that's going to help you find the access that you deserve, even the meekest and most mildest of them all will just the cognitive dissonance, it's hard for them. And I just think one thing I want to affirm here is that you're also just going to get that authentic piece, full transparency from multiple lens here. Yes, as teachers, but also in the interactions with students as well, because they're not always going to know how to receive the content and wisdom and insight that you want to give them. So here in this podcast, you're just going to get that side as well. You're going to get full transparency. You're going to get affirmation that know what you're doing is right, because you may want to sit back like, maybe I need to just do a little fill in the blank and keep it pushing, because they don't look like they struggling like I'm doing. So maybe I need to put on a little more big pedagogy in. And so you're going to get that transparency, but you're also going to get encouragement to keep going and to keep going, period.
Yeah. If I could add on to what has already been said, since so many things have been said, I think for me, in addition to what has been said, it's important to provide a safe community where you can wrestle with eternal emotions that come with doing this work. Similar to Satoia, I came into education very naive, thinking that students being able to read and write would automatically allow them to have access to social upward mobility, which is not the case. So as a result of what is going on, I think a lot of people are starting to question and ask, like, what does urban ed look like? Specifically in my context, what does literacy education look like in this present time? So I think this podcast will provide us to have a conversation of what does it look like. I think a lot of us come into education to do the work and to do it with excellence and to do it with results. And I think this is an opportunity to provide a safe space to to do 2 things: talk about like the eternal emotions you feel as a result of doing this work, and not be judged. I think that's important, because I think sometimes you come in thinking like it's going to be all great, and when you feel bad, when you feel like throwing in the towel, people look at you like you're not thorough. And that's not the case. So I think that's important, that safe space. And then Second, like having a conversation, like as a result of what's going on now, what does our discipline, like our different content areas, what does that instruction look like? Especially since there have been a lot of discussions about abolition. It's abolition, right? Abolition education, all these things about reimagining. Like what does literacy instruction stop? My hope is that we will have an opportunity to have a conversation with you all where it's a safe space where you could come in, take off that mask, and share how you feeling. In addition to kind of like brainstorming, okay, what does our content area look like in this realm?
Yeah, and that's and if I can just add one final thing, like I would, when I think about this, I think about the white educators that look like me that are going to be in this space, and it's super important that you read, you listen, you learn, but you don't stop there. You don't let your whiteness and how you identify as a white person in this space stop you from taking action. I mean, Satoia shared these thoughts before offline about how sometimes people can feel crippled or feel like, oh, because I'm white, I can't do this, or maybe I shouldn't do anything at all, or maybe this isn't my place. But the thing is, racism in this country is not a black person problem. It's a white person problem. It's our problem. It's perpetuated collectively through whiteness. So we have to be the ones to do that work with each other, talking with each other and learning with each other and knowing when to take a seat and when to step in and take action. And it's one of those things that it's in our best interest to do so for the betterment of our society. And when I also think about it, I think Urban Teacher Collective is a space where we can really come together and imagine what we're fighting for. What do we want? Like, we know what we're fighting against, right? Everyone knows what we're fighting against. Robin Kelley says it best, and he talks about how we're fighting against something. We know we're fighting against something, but what are we fighting for? What's the next step? So I think this is an awesome, amazing place where we can actually imagine that. So I didn't know if there was anything else we wanted to kind of cover. We just kind of wanted to give you viewers at home a quick glimpse into who we are. We'll be updating podcast episodes. We'll send out promos and letting you guys know what our episode topics will be about, blogging. We also will be offering teacher coaching. If you're interested, please shoot us an email. It'll be in the YouTube link, but shoot us an email at urbanteachercollective@gmail.com. You can also follow us. Our Instagram and Twitter handle will also be in the link at urbteacherco. Okay, so again, we're here for you. We're here for each other, and please join us on that journey.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.